on when we expose the referee bias and the backroom influence peddling that FIFA built into this 2026 tournament. And that entire web of corruption just took its most devastating, fatal hit. It is a crushing institutional blow for everyone who propped it up for weeks, because the FIFA Ethics Committee just stepped in on its own authority. They moved fast, pushed to the brink by a mountain of last-minute evidence, and bringing down the heavy hammer this kind of absolute dirty play demanded. Gianni Infantino has lost his executive power forever. He will never, ever run another World Cup. At the exact same time, the Argentine Football Association just got hit with the most brutal, detailed disciplinary file that any FIFA body has ever handed down against a national federation. It all comes down to two separate cases. First, the backdoor network of favors running between the outgoing FIFA leadership and the Argentine directors. Investigators tracked this shady partnership step by step, using a mountain of evidence gathered over weeks of tournament play. The second case focuses on that vicious physical assault by Leandro Paredes on Gabi and Eric Garcia, right as Spain started celebrating the final whistle. Two fronts of an absolute massive scandal that we have been tracking with incredibly solid data. Today, that deep reporting turns into an official institutional strike, launched straight from the highest offices of soccer's governing body. Yet, right in the middle of all this madness, we got hit with the most painful, gut-wrenching news of all the kind of blow that leaves real fans totally hollowed out. Leo Messi just officially confirmed his permanent retirement from the Argentine national team. The man who spent 39 years showing us that soccer is, without a doubt, the most beautiful game on earth is walking away. His final match in that iconic blue and white jersey ended up being the most controversial final ever played, of all matches, against Spain. He was a captain who, on his absolute darkest night, chose to walk away from his teammates' raw violence with the class that only the truly greats possess. This sudden exit from his national squad, coupled with the backdrop of his goodbye, in the middle of the absolute biggest institutional scandal in the history of modern soccer, feels incredibly bleak. The dark shadow of the pending investigation against his own federation, combined with the raw, throbbing pain of losing the most important final of his life, is almost too much to bear. It is easily the most heartbreaking and unfair exit that any true legend of this sport has ever been forced to endure. Stick around until the very end because we are breaking down a raw, unfiltered analysis of what actually went down after the final whistle of the most explosive tournament we have ever seen. By the time you finish watching this, everything will make sense. Let's get right into the facts. These events are so incredibly specific, so heavy with history, and so revealing of what this World Cup really was, that we need to examine them piece by piece, with the absolute highest level of detail. Let's start with the Ethics Committee's ruling. To really wrap our heads around what they just pulled off, we first have to understand what their job actually is. What is this committee, really? And what does it mean when they decide to step in on their own, without any formal complaints, just a few hours after the biggest game of the year? They are the internal watchdog group responsible for keeping an eye on the people who actually run global soccer. Their main job is to investigate and thoroughly punish any high-ranking FIFA officials who dare to violate the code of conduct established by the organization itself, at least in theory. They are supposed to operate entirely separate from the FIFA Executive Board. On paper, this supposedly shields them from the blackmail and relentless pressure that the top bosses regularly exert on lower departments. But in actual practice, that independence has always been highly questionable. Sure, they went after Blatter and Platini, but their real action has always depended on heavy, outside pressure from the media and regular fans. It is the kind of pressure that forced the organization to pretend that its internal policing tools actually worked. But today, the committee bypassed all the usual delays and went straight after Gianni Infantino and the Argentine Football Association. Why did they strike so suddenly, without even waiting for anyone to file an official complaint? Because after weeks of constant, non-stop drama, turning a blind eye would have made them look like active accomplices in the corruption that the evidence was already proving beyond any doubt. In the end, the weight of the truth became too heavy to ignore. The referee bias was so painfully obvious, so clumsy, and so thoroughly caught on camera, that doing nothing would have triggered the biggest, most damaging crisis of credibility in the history of soccer's governing body. So they chose to strike. Now, we are going to break down the massive impact of their ruling against Gianni Infantino and the Argentine Federation, looking at every single detail. This is just the beginning. But before we go headfirst into the highly specific details of each of these three critical chapters of the story, it is absolutely essential to place this moment within the broader picture of how this entire tournament played out. Our team started tracking this blatant tournament favoritism during the very first weeks of the 2026 World Cup, exposing that leaked audio from the Dallas VAR room that blew the lid off the absolute farce of Mexico versus England, with referees suspended through late-night emergency statements, moving from those 5 separate quarterfinal scandals swept under the rug in a single night, all the way to the absolute nonsense rules forced onto the final. And let us not forget the massive controversy over appointing Fagani, the cheap shots thrown by Paredes, and that deeply embarrassing speech Infantino delivered during the medal ceremony. For weeks, this was the only place telling these brutal truths with the rigor they deserved. It is the kind of honesty mainstream media could never afford because of their heavy reliance on FIFA sponsors, choosing silence even though their own journalists knew everything. Today, all that hard investigative work gets its most official and undeniable validation. The Ethics Committee finally stepped in. The exact same irregularities we exposed here are now officially confirmed by their own internal investigation. And the punishments handed down today are exactly what this corrupt system deserved since the tournament's very first whistle. The primary driver behind this punishment for Argentina is the dark plot we uncovered in our very first reports, that cozy web of mutual favors spun between outgoing FIFA executives and the Argentine Football Association. This is no wild conspiracy theory. It is the precise reality of what the Ethics Committee uncovered during its probe, exposing those shady, self-serving ties between Infantino and the AFA, links that clearly translated into suspiciously biased refereeing for Argentina during the absolute tightest moments for Scaloni's squad. Think about that leaked audio from Dallas, which exposed the raw chaos inside the VAR room during Mexico versus England, or those heavily disputed calls during Argentina versus Switzerland, like that highly questionable second yellow card handed to the Swiss player, an action the rules explicitly banned VAR from reviewing. Plus, Enzo Fernandez's goal allowed without any of the required scrutiny. This massive mountain of evidence, analyzed here week by week with absolute precision, ended up landing directly with the Ethics Committee. The public pressure was simply too immense, with evidence far too damning for anyone hoping to preserve a shred of credibility. So the committee reacted by opening the first charge of this case, targeting that corrupt web of interest and influence peddling that turned World Cup officiating into a cheap toy for the business and politics of the elites. The second charge stems from what cameras across the globe captured live during that massive final match. It was a crystal clear sequence caught from every conceivable angle in the most watched broadcast of the entire year. Leandro Paredes lashing out at Gabi and Eric Garcia right as Spain celebrated the final whistle. The very footage we showed you in detail. Those cheap shots to the back and cowardly shoves right in the middle of the new champion celebrations. An outburst that the official disciplinary code clearly defines as violent and unsporting conduct. And FIFA had already set a very clear precedent by handing 10-match bans to Kylian Mbappe and Jude Bellingham. The Ethics Committee had to show that exact same firmness against Paredes, so they piled his case into the overall investigation against the AFA, with all the damage that brings. It is a massive blow, both financially and sportingly, that will haunt Argentina for years to come. But do you know what is truly unbelievable about this? What is coming next? But before breaking down the punishment for Argentina and Infantino, we must grasp what this case actually means for the AFA in the real world. This is no mere piece of paper. It is the start of a grueling process that will hammer the federation financially, sportingly, and institutionally for the next few years. Financially, the incoming fine is going to be massive. While the official figures are not yet set in stone, sources close to the Ethics Committee are already leaking astronomical numbers. If we look closely at FIFA history, this would easily become the largest fine ever charged in South American football. Sportingly, a ban on playing official matches, which the committee is currently debating, could actually kick them out of qualifiers for the next World Cup. Let that sink in. Argentina, the very team